is about 2.5 years ago. I went to my first fall retreat, which changed my life. I had heard of Jesus, but you guys were the ones who first told me, really showed me the love of God. So I really just wanted to say thank you for that. So Ben, next slide, that one. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you to Pastor Josh as well as Pastor Ryan for making an amazing youth group and an amazing church. Thank you, you guys are all awesome. Now, about a month ago, I was actually going on a run at Green Hill. I don't know why I went at 4:45 p.m. in December, but I was there. And I actually forgot my headphones, which is very weird because I always do longer runs with headphones in. But I still decided to run, so off I go. And I decided to actually start praying about this sermon because I had no idea what I wanted to talk about. But I like to plan ahead, and so because I'm like that, so I wanted to get it moving. And at about mile 3-ish, idea just slapped me in the face, and so I decided to actually run back to my car and make videos on my phone just of the idea that I had, just saying random things that I could talk about, which made absolutely no sense when I went back to watch them because I was very tired. But the main idea of this you probably saw on the first slide, but it was basically pride and trust. And it actually stemmed from something that we did at One Way, which shout out One Way. You guys should come. That's us at the at Bible study. It's pretty fun. Yeah, it's the guys' Bible study. We always meet on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. It's pretty fun. So yeah, if you are not part of One Way, you should be because it's fun. But I was actually talking about the parable of the sower, which is Matthew 13, 1 through 9. It's right up there. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest you do it. It's a very, very good one. But I was teaching and I got to verses 5 and 6, which is the ones highlighted right there, where it says, "Some fell in rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root." And what I was talking about is how it kind of represented people who had come to church, experienced God, they heard about God, they got really into it, and then something tough came along and then they left. I think Mark actually blew my mind when he said you could also think about it as people who they hear about God and they're doing good, but when the sun is out and everything is going good in their life, they wither away. But when things are tough, they're actually they're still there. They're rocky places, they're still with God, but when the sun comes out, when everything's going good in their life, they wither away. Yeah, go Mark, that hit home for me. I hadn't actually realized how many times that had described me. I hadn't realized how many times I had only prayed to God when something was going wrong in my life, but ignored him when I acted, or when things were going good, I acted as though I didn't need him. And it's interesting because One Way is not just me and Mark teaching through God teaching through us. He's also working on our hearts as well, which is really cool. But what hit me in that moment was it also described my life before I met Jesus. What I would do is I'd just be chilling, going through life, and because I actually take school very seriously, what I would do is before I knew Jesus, I would, when a big test was coming up, I would actually get down on my knees and pray to, and I quote, whatever God is out there, just for help on whatever big test was coming up. I found which God it was, luckily, but I find it funny now, but back then that was how I lived my life because that's all I knew. But a similar thing also happened to me after I came to church, where I would be praying I only be praying to God when something bad happened, but when something good, I was withering away. I was the one who was leaving. But I think I figured out why I was doing that, what I was doing wrong. And I think this is something that we've all struggled with at some point. You may not have. If you aren't struggling with it, go you. But I think at some point we've all struggled with fully trusting God and just giving up control, accepting that nothing you've done is only you. Fully trusting that your plan for your life isn't as perfect as his plan for your life. And I'd like to think that I've accomplished quite a lot in my life so far. I've mainly worked hard in two things, school and sports. And I realized that the reason why I was only praying when something went wrong is because I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was in charge. I thought I owned my life. And I was finding my identity in these things that I'd worked so hard for, and so I kind of looked at God with this attitude of look what I've done. I've put in all these hours. Where were you? I've been doing all this. It was me. What I didn't realize is that I couldn't have done any of those things on my own. What I didn't realize was that I was attributing my successes to God, but when something else, like something bad happened, when I messed up, I was blaming God. I was saying that's his fault. And like doing something well isn't the problem. Like try hard to succeed at whatever you're doing. But the problem is when I thought that I did it all on my own. When I thought that I could have done it without God. And I feel like we all kind of think that at least at some point, like you can do it all on your own until something bad happens, until something stronger than you comes along, and then we call on God. But once that time has passed, once that tough thing has gone away, we kind of live for ourselves again. And I realized that's what I was doing. I was worshiping what I was doing with my own hands, the works of my hands, and I realized, like, I was blaming God for my mistakes. And I feel like we all kind of love being in control until something goes wrong, or we don't know what to do, or we mess up. We all love being in charge until it's time to actually do what being in charge is. And so I have some scripture up. Psalm 12:3 says, "May the Lord silence all flattering lips and boastful tongue. Those who say, by our tongues we will prevail, our own lips defend us, who is Lord over us." And then the next one, Isaiah 10:12-13. "After the Lord used the king of Assyria to accomplish his purpose on Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will turn against the king of Assyria and punish him for he is proud and arrogant. He boasts, by my own powerful arm I have done this. With my own shrewd wisdom I planned it. I have broken down the defenses of nations and carried off their treasures. I have knocked down the kings like a bull. I have robbed their nests of riches and gathered up kingdoms as a farmer gathers eggs. No one can even flap a wing against me or utter a peep of protest." I realized that I was acting like the king of Assyria did right there. I was accepting God's help, but not actually giving him credit for it. And then, the next one, Job 20:22, says, "In his self-sufficiency he will be in distress." We cannot do everything on our own. And we can't even boast of what we've done either. Like, how can we boast? Like, how can we think that we are better than God? Like, his ways are higher than mine. He's perfect, we are not. And I don't know about you guys, but I mess up all the time. I can ever only do things imperfectly. I can only ever be an imperfect student, an imperfect leader, an imperfect brother, an imperfect friend. I can only ever be an imperfect son of God. But God is like the embodiment of perfection. Like he alone can do everything right. And Job 9:12 says, "If he takes away, who can hinder him? Who can say to him, you do not know what you're doing?" How can we say anything like that he has done is wrong? How can we critique our creator? Like he formed us. His plan is perfect whether we see it or not. There's an analogy that I actually love so much. It's basically saying that we're the clay and God is the potter. In Isaiah 45:9 says, "Does a clay potter argue with its maker? Does a clay pot argue with its maker? Does the clay dispute with the one who shapes it, saying, 'Stop, you're doing it wrong'? Does the pot exclaim, 'How clumsy can you be?'" How can we question our maker? And actually at the beginning of that verse, I cut it off, but it says, "What sorrow awaits those who argue with their creator." And I don't know about you guys, I'm not a fan of sorrow. It's not my favorite thing. So I'm going to do my best to not question God. And there's actually a story in Daniel that I just read that I squeezed in here because I just love how much it related to what I was talking about. It's Daniel chapter 4, and it talks about the king Nebuchadnezzar having a dream, and Daniel actually interprets that dream and says that it shows the king being humbled and actually losing his kingdom, living in a field and eating grass. And this dream actually became a reality after Nebuchadnezzar says in verse 30, "Look at this great city of Babylon. By my own power I have built this beautiful city." By my own power I have built this beautiful city. As my royal residence to display my majestic splendor. Like he's being super, super prideful there and saying like the royal residence, like that's his. He's saying that like, he created that. He's like saying, "Look what I've done by myself." And like the way that he actually is restored as the king of Babylon is he actually starts praising God. He actually says in verse 37, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." If we're prideful and we aren't trusting in God, we either be humbled in this life or when we see him when we die. And it comes down to trust. We don't trust God to come through. And I know one of the things I actually struggled with the most when I was a new Christian was, how am I supposed to believe in God when I don't have all the answers, when he doesn't answer every question that I have, he doesn't tell me his full plan. And I remember one thing that I actually met with Pastor Josh at Denny's, of all places. And we were just like catching up, and I started asking him like a bunch of questions, and I got the answer of, look, we don't have a solid answer for that, about 5 or 6 times in a row, which made me kind of skeptical, as well as a little weirded out. So it's like, how do you believe in this God when he doesn't tell you all this stuff, when he doesn't tell you the whole plan, when you don't answer these questions? But what God helped me realize is that that's where faith and trust comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, true faith is completely trusting in God, whether you know his plan or not, whether he is showing you what he's doing in your life or not. And a worship song that I really like called New Wine says, when I trust you, I don't need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to understand. And I don't think we actually even understand it most of the time. Even if he were to tell us like his full plan, God doesn't always need us to understand. And I actually saw a really convicting tweet from a Christian NFL player named Marquise Goodwin. This is right there. It says, you relax on a plane even though you don't know the pilot. You relax on a ship even though you don't know the captain. You relax on a bus even though you don't know the driver. Why don't you relax in life knowing that God's in control? I'm not gonna lie, that stepped on my toes pretty hard, because I hadn't realized how many people I had fully trusted my life with before God. I hadn't realized that I had trusted like probably 10 or 20 people with fully with my life, and I hadn't fully given God my life. Like, those people had gone to school for a couple of years, maybe flight school for a little bit, but